Egusa, thank you again to all of our sponsors for this National Indigenous Virtual Tech Conference. Now let's welcome a favorite here in Manitoba, talking about local radio in our communities.
Anin, bonjour, amik, Anijnakas, makwa, totem. I'm Doug Thomas. My parents are Gordon and Annabelle Thomas, both from Peguis First Nation. I am also a First Nation traditional warrior and storyteller. I'm the owner of Master Trek Multimedia. When I turned 14, I started my own recording studio, Master Trek. Over the years, my business kind of shut down and Thomas Multimedia took over. So now I work for my wife, Tracy Thomas, and my son. He now runs the business with my wife, and I now sit back and advise and just help out whenever I can with advice. So Thomas Multimedia is what our business's name is now, and it's owned by my wife Tracy. And over the years, I've been responsible for setting up several different radio stations throughout Manitoba. The first one was Peguis. Peguis was set up back in 1992, I believe. Thomas Multimedia started off as a recording studio, but over the years it evolved into a multimedia business, which does video production, web design, graphic design, communication towers. We also set up point-to-point networks. Before I started with Thomas Multimedia, I had my own business called Master Trek. Master Trek was a recording studio that I started when I was 14 years old. I'm now 50. So I started young. I started to learn about recording and audio from a young age. I always had a curiosity with technology. I always wanted to figure out things on how did things work, how did the TV work, how did I used to take things apart. One time I took the television apart. My mom and dad came home and the TV was in pieces in the middle of the floor, and it's one of those big floor model ones that we had sitting there. So I always had a curiosity. I wanted to discover how things and understand how things worked. And in fact, that's the themes of the conference: is learn, discover, understand, and enhance. And that's one of the things that I've done throughout my whole life and career. Is I've always learned technologies and evolved with different technologies. A little bit about myself. When I first started with the recording studio at 14, it started with a 4-track recorder, evolved up into a 6-track recorder, and then I moved into a digital recorder. And I've always had the curiosity and I've always wanted to learn. I never stopped learning. I never stopped trying to discover and understand how things could work. And that's in fact, I embrace that. I always try to empower people. I empower the youth and different people that I've worked with to take what you learned and then apply it. And I've done that. I don't have a lot of formal training, but I have a lot of experience. And I encourage people not to be afraid of technology, but to embrace it. It could enhance the lifestyle and skills and enhance your communities. When we first launched Peguis Radio, one of the first things that I noticed is that the community morale was boosted. It was really, it changed the way the community talked, the way people, the excitement that people had. about people being able to phone in and talk on the radio and have the whole community hear what they're saying. It was such an exciting time. It was such a new thing for the community, and we didn't realize how much it actually enhanced the lives of the people in the community. And as a result of the radio station, not only did it enhance the lives through morally, but it also, they started doing the community radio bingos, and that started to generate a lot of revenue. So Peguis was one of the first radio stations that I was responsible for helping launch. What we did is I first hired someone that worked with a radio station in Manitoba, and they came in and they did everything for us, and I seen how it was done, and I figured, well, I could have did that. That's exactly what I would have done. But I would have did this and this, and I would have changed things. And that's what actually happened is once they came in and set up the radio station in Peguis, I started to change the way that we put a computer in and started to automate things, and it was interesting to see how things evolved over time and how things have changed, and technology has changed. And I think I want to touch on sovereignty. I want to talk about digital sovereignty. One of the things that we started when we first started setting up the radio stations with Peguis is we followed the guidelines that Canada had set by going under the applying for the broadcast license. And what I found is by applying for the broadcast license through Canada, it restricted us. It put limitations on us. It stifled everything that we wanted to do in the community. Going forward, what I've seen is other communities that had taken a sovereign approach. Instead of going and asking Canada to regulate us, they said, we'll make our own law and we'll regulate ourselves. So that's what they did. Many of the radio stations, they didn't consult with Canada as far as getting the broadcast license. However, even though we didn't follow their regulations and guidelines to a T the way they wanted us, because it was very restricting. They wanted you to broadcast at 48 watts, which why would we do that? We want to reach our whole territory. Our territories are far and wide. So what we did is we just started putting in the 500 watt transmitters and not asking for permission. We just did it. And that's exactly what we have to do, is understand our position of First Nation sovereignty. And I think if you could understand First Nation sovereignty and look at things from a sovereign approach and the local government and realize we are a nation, we are a sovereign nation, we could do what we want as a nation. Does Canada go and ask for United States for permission? No, but they are courteous, and there is those partnerships that we make, and we do have partnerships with Canada. And however, we don't go and ask them for permission on a lot of things like the radio stations. We will follow the guidelines as far as when I launch a radio station, usually what I'll do is I'll ask is, if this radio station is interfering with anyone else, please contact the band office. So we've taken the sovereign approach in that respect. And I encourage people to continue to do that and look at and try to understand what is sovereignty, what is First Nation sovereignty. And once you understand First Nation sovereignty, then you realize, why would we ask someone else to regulate and restrict us? And I think that we have to understand that and take that approach more often. I believe that we as First Nation people need to hang on to our traditions. And when I talk about hanging on to traditions, I'm talking about the things that we did as traditionally as a community, and the structures that we had in place, the lifestyle that we had, the controls that we had in place, the government we had in place. People don't like the word government, but believe it or not, there was leadership that led the community. And as First Nation people, we had these structures in place. We had our sovereignty. We had our family roles and responsibilities. And when I talk about tradition, I'm not talking about your spiritual belief. I'm talking about our traditional values and things that we used to do as people. we need to return to those ways and like the family values and how we were taught and how we were learned and how our elders taught us and how we were taught what to say, what not to say. And as people, we knew that. We had those values. It didn't have to be said. It didn't have to have laws in place. We didn't have to have policies and procedures in place for the way we would conduct ourselves, because we were taught. And we were taught how to respect others, how to... What I'm trying to say is that we don't need Canada to regulate us. We have our own ways of regulating what's said in our communities and how things are done in our communities. If we look back in, if someone was out of line in the communities, the men or people would go and sit someone down and talk to them and deal with them in a way. And we do that now within our government and in our communities. As far as radio stations are concerned, it's up to the leadership who they want to put into, or however their procedures are in place. And we rely on that. We don't need Canada to regulate us and to control our content, because we do that ourselves. As far as digital sovereignty and going forward, what I've been talking about is actual radio stations and FM radio stations. After we start setting up radio stations like this, the same towers that we've been using for the radio stations are the same towers that the communities were using for communicating internet. So one of the first stations, like for example Peguis, we set up the tower. The actual tower, the purpose of the tower was to send a signal from Peguis to Fisher River. They did is they put a radio from the Peguis tower to the Fisher River tower, and they were able to communicate broadband internet. So what I started to do going forward is I started to use point-to-point radios. And with the radio station in Peguis, one of the first things that we experimented with was doing a local remote broadcast from the Peguis Treaty Grounds. So the Peguis fire hall, where the radio station was housed, was too far for wires or anything, any type of wireless audio transmitters. So what I did is I set up these point-to-point networks from the radio station. I set up a dish in the window of the radio station, and I bridged the network right to the treaty grounds using these dishes on the side of the buildings, and it worked. I was able to bridge a Wi-Fi connection. I think it was about over a kilometer and a half. So that was way back in the 80s, early 80s, or no, late 80s. That was way back in the 90s, sometime in the 90s. So with one tower, you could accomplish several different things. You could set up a radio station. You could set up a Wi-Fi distribution point once you have internet, and a point to multi-point using Ubiquity is one of the main radio suppliers. There's others out there that make radios that are almost the same as Ubiquity, just different name brands. Like this one here, this is the one that I use on my house. When I moved to Peguis and got my house back, we were waiting for internet to be hooked up in our house, and MTS said that they came, our internet service provider came, and they said we weren't home, but we were home. And I got mad basically, and I figured, well, why would I wait for them and I could just hook it up myself? So what I did is I asked my in-laws, can I set up this at your house and share your internet? And they have satellite TV, so they didn't mind if I shared their internet. So what we did is we set this point-to-point network on their house and my house, and from that we were able to share internet from my in-laws. I got some pictures here. This is one of the first towers that we did ourselves. This one was in Skowhegan First Nation. You could see I was quite a bit chunkier here. We learned a lot doing this the hard way, the wrong way, and I learned from experience. You could see in this piece here, we're using a big machine to help lift some of the pieces in place. The first tower that we did took us 3 weeks, and the last one that we did took us 4 hours to erect. So we've come quite a long ways. This is the Peguis Arena. They broadcast at the Peguis Arena, the hockey games, and they do a remote broadcast through telephone to the radio station. This is one of the phone taps that we use, one of the pieces of equipment that we connect the phone lines to so that we could tap it into the radio station. This is, I believe this is Crane River First Nation. Here you could see their outboard gear on the left-hand side. I have some video of that one as well. Some of this outboard gear. We do a lot of it digitally now with software, so there's no need to have a lot of the outboard gear that we see here. This one here is more of a compact one. It's in editing mode right now for recording. That's on-air console that we supply to the radio stations. What else here? Oh, here's some video footage on top of one of the towers that we were setting up. I had the helmet on my head with a GoPro on it. So as I'm climbing, you could kind of see the view. And then I took the helmet off and looked at the camera. Again, this is quite some time ago.
You're listening to Peguis Radio 102.7 FM. This is the only radio station. This is Candace Sutherland.
This is Roberta Sutherland.
This is the only radio station that we listen to.
It's the
Peguis Radio 102.7 FM.
102.7 FM, Peguis' very own.
darling, I'm feeling pretty lonesome. I'd call you on the phone some, but I don't have a dime. Darling, you're so far behind me. Tomorrow's gonna find me.
So I'm going to put that on hold, and then I'm going to get Thunderstruck on now.
And I'm out of here. Catch you later.
Okay. Are you really leaving?
Yeah.
Peguis Radio 102.7 FM.
Digital sovereignty, lighting the pathway to connectivity. I encourage you to take a sovereign approach. Just do it. Assert your sovereignty. Make it happen. Just do what you have to do. Don't worry about licensing, registrations. You'll do that as a community naturally. If something is starting to bring corruption in your community, then close that door. But right now, technology is something that we need to embrace, discover, understand, and because it can enhance the lifestyle of our youth, our businesses. Everything that you need could be found on the internet nowadays. So I want to thank you again for sitting through this. Ekose. I hope I didn't bore you. I wish I could answer questions. Once again, I'd like to thank the Indigenous Tech Conference for having me as a guest speaker, or as one of the speakers. Mike Miigwech. Thank you.